Caitlin Clark lived a quiet, unassuming life in the heart of a busy city. She wasn't someone people would notice at first glance. Average height, with curly brown hair often tied back into a loose ponytail, and a warm smile that lit up her face whenever she greeted someone. But Caitlin had a way about her, a quiet charm that made people feel seen and heard, even if they were just stopping by for a quick cup of coffee. Her workplace, a small cafe tucked away on a cobblestone street, was her second home. It wasn't flashy or trendy like the big chains nearby, but it had character. The walls were painted a soft cream color, adorned with local artwork. Strings of tiny fairy lights hung above the counter, casting a golden glow over the room during late afternoons. Every morning, Caitlin arrived early to brew the first batch of coffee, filling the air with its rich aroma. She loved watching how the steam curled upward as she poured hot water over freshly ground beans. The cafe attracted all kinds of people: young professionals typing furiously on their laptops, elderly couples sharing slices of cake, students cramming for exams, and tourists trying to escape the chaos of the city. Each customer brought something unique to the space, and Caitlin thrived on these interactions. Whether it was recommending her favorite latte flavor to a new visitor or remembering a regular's usual order, she took pride in making everyone feel welcome. To many, she wasn't just a barista, she was part of their daily routine, a familiar face in an ever-changing world. One crisp autumn morning, everything seemed normal. The leaves outside had turned shades of amber and gold, swirling gently in the breeze. Inside the cafe, sunlight filtered through the large windows, creating patterns on the wooden floors. Caitlin moved behind the counter with practiced ease, chatting with customers and humming softly under her breath. A group of college students sat huddled together near the fireplace, laughing over shared stories. An older man flipped through the pages of a newspaper while sipping his black coffee. Everything felt peaceful, almost serene. But peace has a way of being disrupted when you least expect it. Around 9:30 a.m., the door swung open with a jingle of the bell above it. In walked a man who immediately stood out from the usual crowd. He looked disheveled, his clothes wrinkled and stained, his hair sticking out in odd directions. His eyes darted around the room nervously, scanning the faces of the patrons before landing on Caitlin behind the counter. For a brief moment, he hesitated, standing frozen near the entrance. Then, without warning, he strode toward her with determined steps. The clatter of dishes and low murmur of conversations faded into the background as everyone turned to watch him. "What's wrong with all of you?" he barked suddenly, his voice loud enough to startle several customers. "Why is everyone so fake here? Hiding behind your phones and your fancy drinks?" His words hung heavy in the air, sharp and cutting. The atmosphere shifted instantly, the warmth of the cafe replaced by an uncomfortable tension. People exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to laugh, leave, or intervene. Some instinctively reached for their phones, perhaps to call security, or record the scene. Others froze mid-bite, forks hovering awkwardly over plates. Even the baristas working alongside Caitlin paused what they were doing, staring wide-eyed at the unfolding drama. Caitlin, however, didn't flinch. Years of dealing with difficult situations had taught her to stay calm under pressure. Instead of reacting defensively or raising her voice, she met the man's gaze steadily. There was no anger in her expression, only curiosity. She noticed the lines etched deeply into his forehead, the dark circles under his bloodshot eyes. Beneath the harsh tone and aggressive stance, there was vulnerability, a rawness that hinted at pain buried beneath layers of frustration. Though most people might have dismissed him as rude or unreasonable, Caitlin saw beyond the surface. She saw a human being who clearly needed help, even if he didn't know how to ask for it. Without missing a beat, Caitlin leaned slightly forward, resting her hands on the edge of the counter. "I'm sorry if we've made you feel unwelcome," she said softly, her voice carrying across the now silent cafe. "Can I get you a cup of coffee? On the house?" Her offer caught everyone off guard. No one expected kindness in response to hostility. The stranger blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. His jaw tightened as though he wanted to argue further, but instead he muttered a gruff fine and shuffled to a nearby table, dropping heavily onto a chair. The collective sigh of relief from the other customers was almost audible. Conversations resumed slowly, though whispers about the incident continued to ripple through the room. As Caitlin prepared the man's drink, a strong black coffee, just how she imagined he might like it, she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment mattered more than it seemed. Something about his outburst lingered in her mind, tugging at her thoughts. Was it really about the cafe, or was it something deeper? Determined to find out, she decided to take a risk. After pouring the coffee, she grabbed a napkin, scribbled a short note on it, and carried the mug over to his table. Placing it carefully in front of him, she pulled out a chair and sat down. "Hi," she began, her tone gentle yet confident. "My name's Caitlin. Can I ask why you're upset today?" At first, the man avoided her gaze, fidgeting with the handle of the mug. He seemed caught between irritation and surprise, unsure how to respond to her unexpected kindness. But Caitlin waited patiently, giving him time to process. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed deeply and began to speak. His words came haltingly at first, but soon they poured out in a torrent. He talked about losing his job months ago, struggling to pay rent and feeling invisible in a city that moved too fast to care. Loneliness and frustration had consumed him, leaving him angry, not just at others, but at himself. As he spoke, tears welled up in his eyes, and Caitlin listened intently, nodding occasionally to show she understood. By the time he finished, the cafe was quieter than before, bathed in the soft glow of afternoon light. The man wiped his face with the back of his hand, looking embarrassed but also lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. "Thank you," he mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. Caitlin smiled warmly. "You're not alone," she replied, simply. And in that moment, both of them knew things would never be quite the same again. This encounter set the stage for something extraordinary. What started as a tense confrontation became a lesson in empathy, not just for Caitlin and the stranger, but for everyone who witnessed it. Little did they know, this single act of compassion would ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the cozy confines of the cafe. The cafe buzzed with quiet murmurs as Caitlin sat across from the stranger, her presence calm and unwavering. The man, whose name she would later learn was Daniel, looked down at his coffee, stirring it absent-mindedly with a wooden stirrer. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the storm of emotion still swirling inside him. Caitlin didn't push or interrupt. Instead, she gave him space to gather his thoughts. She had always believed that listening was one of the most powerful acts of kindness anyone could offer, and in this moment it felt like the right thing to do. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice quieter but tinged with bitterness. "I don't know why I even came here," he admitted. "It's stupid. Everyone's got their perfect little lives, scrolling on their phones, sipping expensive drinks. Meanwhile, I can barely afford to eat." He shook his head, staring into the dark liquid in his mug. "I feel invisible, like no one cares if I live or die." Caitlin leaned forward slightly, her expression soft but focused. "That must be really hard," she said sincerely. Her words weren't dismissive or overly sympathetic. They were honest, validating what he was feeling without judgment. "I'm sorry you're going through this. You're not invisible to me, though. I see you." Her response caught Daniel off guard. For a moment, he stopped stirring his coffee and looked up at her, searching her face for any hint of insincerity. But all he found was genuine concern. It was something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Someone truly seeing him, acknowledging his pain without turning away. "I lost my job months ago," he continued after a pause. "I used to work in construction, but when the company went under, so did I. No savings, no backup plan. I've been bouncing between couches trying to figure out how to get back on my feet, but nothing works. Every door feels like it's slamming shut." His voice cracked slightly as he added, "And then there are days when I just want to scream at the world because nobody seems to understand." Caitlin nodded slowly, her heart aching for him. "That sounds exhausting," she said gently. "It's okay to feel angry, You've been carrying so much by yourself." She paused, then asked, "Do you have anyone you can talk to? Friends, family?" Daniel shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "Not really. My parents passed away years ago, and my sister. We don't talk anymore. As for friends," he trailed off, shaking his head. "People drift apart when you're struggling. They stop calling, stop inviting you places. After a while, you realize you're on your own." For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The hum of conversations around them faded into the background, leaving only the faint hiss of the espresso machine and the occasional clink of cups. Caitlin took a deep breath, choosing her next words carefully. "What about today?" she asked. "Why did you come here?" He hesitated before answering. "Honestly, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to sit somewhere warm for a bit. But then I walked in and saw everyone laughing, chatting, looking so happy. And I couldn't take it. It made me angry. Not at them exactly, but at everything. At myself, mostly." Caitlin studied him thoughtfully, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't fix his problems. That wasn't her role. But she also knew she couldn't let him leave without offering some kind of support. "You deserve to be happy too, Daniel," she said firmly. "Just because things feel impossible now doesn't mean they'll stay that way forever. Sometimes it takes one small step to start changing things." He raised an eyebrow skeptically. "One small step? What does that even mean?" She smiled faintly. "It means doing one thing today that makes tomorrow a little better. Maybe it's reaching out to someone you trust or finding a resource that can help. Or maybe it's just letting yourself rest and breathe for a while. Whatever it is, you don't have to do it alone." Daniel stared at her, unsure how to respond. He had expected rejection, judgment, maybe even anger. Instead, he was met with compassion and understanding. It was disarming, almost overwhelming. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope, a fragile, uncertain light, but hope nonetheless. As their conversation continued, Caitlin shared stories of her own struggles, keeping them brief but relatable. She talked about times when she'd felt lost or overwhelmed and how leaning on others had helped her get through it. "We all need help sometimes," she said. "There's no shame in asking for it." By the time they finished talking, nearly an hour had passed. The cafe had filled up with new customers, and the staff had subtly resumed their tasks, giving Caitlin and Daniel privacy. When Daniel stood up to leave, his demeanor was noticeably different. Gone was the tension in his shoulders, the sharp edge in his voice. In its place was a quiet sense of resolve. "Thank you," he said softly, meeting her eyes for the first time since sitting down. I didn't expect this." Caitlin grinned, standing up to walk him to the door. "Anytime," she replied warmly. "And hey, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here, okay?" He nodded, gripping the strap of his worn backpack tightly. Before stepping outside, he turned back and added, "You're good at this, you know. Listening. Most people wouldn't bother." Her smile widened. Maybe more people should try it. Unbeknownst to either of them, their interaction hadn't gone unnoticed. Several patrons had overheard snippets of their conversation, enough to piece together the story. One woman, sitting near the window with a laptop open, typed furiously as she recounted the scene. By evening, her post titled, "Stranger Shouts at Barista. Her response will change how you see kindness," had gained thousands of likes and shares online. Comments poured in from strangers praising Caitlin's patience and empathy, calling her actions a lesson in humanity. Word spread quickly. Local news outlets picked up the story, interviewing customers who had witnessed the exchange. Within days, Caitlin's simple act of kindness became a viral sensation. People marveled at how she had transformed a potentially volatile situation into a moment of connection and healing. Social media lit up with hashtags like "Be Like Caitlin" and "The Care and Kindness Matters," inspiring countless others to share their own stories of compassion. Despite the sudden attention, Caitlin remained humble. When reporters approached her for interviews, she politely declined most offers, insisting that she hadn't done anything extraordinary. "Anyone could have done what I did," she told one journalist during a rare interview. All I did was listen. That's it. We underestimate how powerful listening can be. But the impact of her actions reached far beyond the cafe walls. Customers began treating each other differently, holding doors open, offering smiles, and engaging in longer conversations. Regulars started bringing extra snacks or drinks to share with those who seemed down on their luck. Even the staff noticed a shift in the atmosphere, a renewed sense of community and care. Days turned into weeks, and life at the cafe returned to its usual rhythm. Yet the memory of that morning lingered, a reminder of the profound effect one person's kindness could have. For Caitlin, it reinforced her belief in the importance of empathy. For Daniel, it marked the beginning of a difficult yet hopeful journey toward rebuilding his life. And for everyone else, it served as a testament to the power of human connection, a beacon of light in a world often clouded by indifference. Little did Caitlin know, however, that this was only the beginning. The ripple effects of her actions would soon lead to unexpected encounters and opportunities, proving once again that even the smallest gestures can change lives in ways no one could predict. The days following Daniel's visit to the cafe felt different, though Caitlin couldn't quite put her finger on why. At first glance, everything seemed normal. The same hum of conversation, the same clatter of cups and saucers, the same comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. But there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, an undercurrent of warmth that hadn't been there before. Customers smiled more readily at one another, held doors open with genuine enthusiasm, and lingered just a bit longer at their tables. It was as if Caitlin's interaction with Daniel had sparked something, a quiet reminder of the importance of kindness, that rippled through everyone who witnessed it. For Caitlin herself, life carried on much as it always had. She continued her routine, arriving early to prep the cafe, chatting with regulars, and crafting drinks with care. Yet, she noticed small changes, too. People approached her counter not just to order, but to thank her. "You handled that situation so well," one woman said, clutching her latte. "It made me think about how I treat others." Another customer, a young man in a hoodie, shyly admitted, "I saw what you did for that guy. It inspired me to call my dad. We haven't talked in months." These moments touched Caitlin deeply, though she brushed off any praise. To her, it wasn't about being extraordinary. It was simply about doing what felt right. Still, she couldn't deny the sense of fulfillment she felt knowing that her actions had resonated with others. Each kind word or gesture reinforced her belief that even the smallest acts of compassion could create waves far beyond what anyone might expect. Meanwhile, the story of Caitlin and Daniel continued to spread like wildfire. The viral post written by the woman near the window had ignited a chain reaction across social media platforms. Strangers from all over the country chimed in, sharing their thoughts and experiences. Some recounted similar moments when someone's kindness had changed their perspective. Others vowed to follow Caitlin's example, promising to approach difficult situations with patience and empathy instead of anger or dismissal. Local news outlets weren't far behind. Reporters descended upon the cafe, eager to capture the essence of the story. They interviewed patrons, snapped photos of the cozy interior, and even tried to persuade Caitlin to sit down for an extended interview. Though hesitant at first, Caitlin eventually agreed to speak briefly, wanting to emphasize the message rather than herself. "This isn't about me," she told the cameras, her voice steady and sincere. "It's about reminding ourselves that we're all human. We all have struggles, and sometimes all it takes is a little understanding to make a difference." Her words struck a chord. Clips of the interview aired on local television stations and were shared online, drawing even more attention. Soon, national media picked up the story, turning Caitlin into an unlikely symbol of empathy and resilience. Calls poured in from talk shows and podcasts, each eager to feature her as a guest. While flattered, Caitlin politely declined most invitations, preferring to stay grounded in her daily life. Fame wasn't what she sought. It was connection that mattered to her. Amidst the whirlwind of attention, Daniel remained on Caitlin's mind. She often wondered how he was doing, hoping that their conversation had given him some measure of peace. Occasionally, she glanced toward the door, half expecting him to walk in again. When weeks passed without a sign of him, she began to worry. Had their brief encounter truly helped, or had it only provided temporary relief? She wished she could do more, but without a way to reach him, all she could do was hope. Then, one chilly November morning, the bell above the cafe door jingled, and Caitlin looked up to see a familiar face. It was Daniel. He stood hesitantly, in the doorway, wearing a cleaner jacket and holding a bouquet of flowers, simple daisies wrapped in brown paper. His hair was combed neatly, and his eyes, though still weary, held a glimmer of determination. The sight of him brought an instant smile to Caitlin's face. "Hey," she greeted warmly, stepping out from behind the counter. "I didn't know if I'd see you again." Daniel shuffled forward awkwardly, clutching the flowers tightly. "I wasn't sure I'd come back either," he admitted, his voice tinged with nervousness. "But I wanted to say thank you, properly this time." Caitlin took the bouquet, her heart swelling with gratitude. "These are beautiful," she said softly. "But really, Daniel, you don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could help." He shook his head, clearly determined to express himself. "No, you don't understand. That day, it meant a lot to me. More than you probably realize. After we talked, I started thinking differently. I reached out to my sister, and we've been talking again. I also went to a job fair and found a lead on a new position. Things aren't perfect yet, but they're getting better, and it's because of you." Tears pricked at the corners of Caitlin's eyes as she listened. She hadn't expected such a direct impact, and hearing Daniel's words filled her with a profound sense of purpose. "That's amazing," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, Daniel. You're the one doing the hard work. I just gave you a nudge." "You gave me more than that," he insisted. "You reminded me that people can still care, that maybe I'm worth caring about." His honesty left Caitlin momentarily speechless. She reached out and placed a hand on his arm, squeezing gently. "Of course you are," she said firmly. "Never forget that." Their reunion drew the attention of other patrons, many of whom recognized Daniel from the viral story. A few applauded quietly, moved by the scene unfolding before them. Daniel blushed, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, but Caitlin quickly diffused the moment. "Come on," she said with a grin. "Let's grab a table and catch up properly." Over the next hour, they sat together, sipping coffee and exchanging updates. Daniel shared more details about his progress, how reconnecting with his sister had reignited old memories, how applying for jobs had reignited his confidence. Caitlin, in turn, opened up about the unexpected spotlight she'd found herself in. They laughed, joked, and even shed a few tears, bonding over their shared humanity. As Daniel prepared to leave, he turned to Caitlin one last time. "I'll never forget what you did for me," he said earnestly. "And I promise I'll pay it forward. Maybe not in the same way, but somehow." She nodded, her smile radiant. "That's all I could ever ask for." When Daniel walked out the door, the cafe fell silent for a moment, as though everyone was processing what they'd just witnessed. Then slowly, conversations resumed, infused with renewed energy and optimism. For Caitlin, however, the experience served as a powerful reminder. Kindness wasn't just about grand gestures or viral moments. It was about showing up, listening, and believing in the possibility of change, even when it felt impossible. What neither Caitlin nor Daniel realized, however, was that their story was far from over. The ripple effects of their encounter would continue to unfold in ways neither of them could anticipate, touching lives far beyond the walls of the cafe. Little did they know, the seeds of compassion they had planted were already beginning to bloom, spreading roots deeper and wider than either of them could imagine. The weeks that followed Daniel's return to the cafe were transformative, not just for Caitlin and Daniel, but for the entire community surrounding the little coffee shop. The story of their encounter had taken on a life of its own, inspiring countless people to reflect on their own actions and relationships. What started as a single act of kindness in a quiet corner of the city had grown into something much larger, a movement fueled by empathy, connection, and the belief that even small gestures could spark meaningful change. For Caitlin, life became a delicate balancing act between her newfound fame and her desire to remain grounded. Every day, strangers visited the cafe hoping to meet her, some traveling from neighboring towns just to shake her hand or share their stories. Many brought gifts, handwritten letters, homemade cookies, even small tokens of appreciation like keychains or bookmarks. Others simply wanted to talk, pouring out their hearts about personal struggles or moments when they had been inspired to show kindness themselves. At first, Caitlin found it overwhelming. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, and the constant influx of visitors made it challenging to focus on her work. But over time, she learned to embrace it. Each interaction reminded her why she loved her job, not just for the joy of making coffee, but for the opportunity to connect with people on a deeper level. Whether it was listening to a young mother vent about the pressures of parenting or encouraging a college student unsure about their career path, Caitlin discovered that her role extended far beyond serving drinks. She was a confidant, a cheerleader, and sometimes a lifeline. One particularly memorable visitor was an elderly woman named Margaret, who came into the cafe one rainy afternoon clutching a worn umbrella. Her hands trembled as she ordered a tea, and Caitlin immediately noticed the sadness etched into her face. After preparing her drink, Caitlin struck up a conversation, asking if everything was okay. At first, Margaret hesitated, brushing off the question with a polite smile, but Caitlin's persistence paid off. Eventually, Margaret opened up, revealing that she had recently lost her husband of 50 years and felt utterly alone. "I don't know what to do without him," she confessed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He was my whole world." Caitlin listened intently, offering words of comfort and support. By the end of their conversation, Margaret left the cafe with a renewed sense of hope, promising to reach out to old friends she hadn't spoken to in years. Weeks later, she returned with a photo album filled with pictures of her late husband, eager to share memories with Caitlin and the other regulars. It was moments like these that reinforced Caitlin's belief in the power of human connection. Meanwhile, Daniel's life continued to improve in ways he never thought possible. With Caitlin's encouragement, he had reached out to his sister Sarah, ending years of silence between them. Their initial phone call had been awkward, filled with apologies and explanations, but it quickly evolved into heartfelt conversations about their childhood and shared dreams for the future. Sarah even invited Daniel to stay with her temporarily, while he got back on his feet. For the first time in months, Daniel felt a sense of stability and belonging. Job hunting proved more difficult than expected, but Daniel refused to give up. He attended workshops, updated his resume, and networked tirelessly, determined to find work that aligned with his skills. One day, after weeks of searching, he landed a part-time position at a local hardware store. Though it wasn't glamorous, it gave him a sense of purpose and routine. More importantly, it allowed him to save money and start rebuilding his confidence. Daniel also kept his promise to pay it forward. Inspired by Caitlin's example, he began volunteering at a nearby soup kitchen every Saturday morning. At first, he felt out of place, unsure how to interact with the diverse group of volunteers and visitors. But soon, he found his rhythm, serving meals, cleaning tables, and striking up conversations with those in need. One man, a veteran struggling with homelessness, reminded Daniel of himself, lost, frustrated, and desperate for a second chance. Taking a page from Caitlin's book, Daniel sat down with the man, listening intently as he shared his story. By the end of their chat, the veteran thanked Daniel profusely, saying, "You're the first person in a long time who actually cared enough to listen." Back at the cafe, Caitlin noticed a shift not only in herself, but in the behavior of her customers. Regular patrons began treating each other with more patience and generosity, forming friendships that transcended age, background, and circumstance. A group of students started hosting study sessions in the cafe, inviting older customers to join them for lively discussions about books and current events. Even the staff grew closer, supporting one another during busy shifts and celebrating milestones together. The cafe had always been a welcoming space, but now it felt like a true community hub, a place where people came not just for coffee, but for connection. Social media played a significant role in amplifying the impact of Caitlin's actions. Hashtags like Kindness Revolution and Be Like Caitlin trended for days, prompting thousands of users to share their own stories of compassion. Some recounted moments when a stranger's kindness had brightened their day. Others vowed to perform random acts of goodwill, from paying for someone's meal to leaving encouraging notes in public places. Schools incorporated Caitlin's story into lesson plans, teaching children the importance of empathy and active listening. Local businesses organized events centered around giving back, such as free yoga classes for underserved communities or donation drives for shelters. Even celebrities joined the conversation, using their platforms to spread awareness. One actress posted a video praising Caitlin's humility and urging her followers to be the light in someone else's life. Another musician dedicated a song to Caitlin, performing it live during a concert and dedicating proceeds from downloads to mental health initiatives. These endorsements helped elevate the message further, reaching audiences worldwide. Despite the widespread recognition, Caitlin remained steadfast in her mission to stay humble. She declined lucrative sponsorship deals and offers to write a book, choosing instead to focus on her daily interactions. "This isn't about me," she repeatedly emphasized. "It's about reminding ourselves that we all have the power to make a difference no matter how big or small." Still, Caitlin couldn't ignore the profound effect her actions had on others. Letters arrived daily from people thanking her for inspiring them to be kinder, braver, and more compassionate. One note stood out in particular, a letter from a teenage girl named Emily, who revealed that she had been contemplating suicide until she read about Caitlin's story online. "Your kindness gave me hope," Emily wrote. "It reminded me that there are still good people in the world, and maybe I can be one of them too." Reading those words brought Caitlin to tears. She realized then that her decision to listen to Daniel that fateful morning had set off a chain reaction far greater than she ever imagined. Lives were being changed, not because of anything extraordinary she had done, but because she had chosen to see the humanity in someone else. As December approached, the cafe transformed into a winter wonderland, adorned with twinkling lights, garlands, and festive decorations. Caitlin worked tirelessly alongside her team to create a warm, inviting atmosphere for the holiday season. On the last Friday before Christmas, she hosted a special event called A Night of Gratitude, inviting customers to share stories of kindness they had experienced or witnessed throughout the year. People of all ages gathered around, sipping hot cocoa and swapping tales that ranged from heartwarming to hilarious. But the highlight of the evening came when Daniel walked in, carrying a guitar. He had written a song inspired by his journey and Caitlin's unwavering support. As he strummed the chords and sang softly, the room fell silent, captivated by his heartfelt lyrics. When he finished, the audience erupted into applause, many wiping away tears. Caitlin hugged him tightly afterward, overwhelmed with pride and gratitude. That night marked a turning point, not just for Caitlin and Daniel, but for everyone present. They left the cafe feeling inspired, hopeful, and deeply connected to one another. Little did they know, however, that this was merely the beginning. The seeds of compassion they had planted would continue to grow, branching outward in ways none of them could predict. And through it all, Caitlin remained a steadfast beacon of light, proving that even the simplest acts of kindness could change the world, one person at a time. As the new year rolled in, Caitlin found herself reflecting on everything that had transpired since that fateful autumn morning when Daniel stormed into the cafe. The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotions, challenges, and unexpected joys. What began as a single act of empathy had grown into something far greater, a ripple effect of kindness that touched lives across the city and beyond. Yet despite the accolades and attention, Caitlin remained grounded in her purpose: to create moments of connection, one cup of coffee at a time. The cafe itself became more than just a place to grab a drink or catch up on work. It evolved into a sanctuary for people from all walks of life: students cramming for exams, parents seeking quiet corners to nurse their babies, seniors reminiscing about the good old days, and strangers simply looking for a sense of belonging. Regular patrons often remarked how the atmosphere had shifted subtly but noticeably. Conversations lingered longer, laughter echoed louder, and smiles seemed to come easier. Even the staff noticed the change. They worked with renewed energy, treating each customer not as a transaction, but as an opportunity to make someone's day brighter. One such patron was Mia, a young woman who first visited the cafe during a particularly low point in her life. She had recently moved to the city after ending a toxic relationship, leaving behind friends, family, and everything familiar. Lonely and overwhelmed, she wandered into the cafe one snowy afternoon, drawn by its cozy ambiance and the promise of warmth. At first, she kept to herself, hunched over a book while sipping a chai latte. But Caitlin, ever observant, sensed there was more to Mia's story. "Hey," Caitlin said gently during her next visit, placing a fresh cup of tea on the table. "How are you holding up?" Mia looked up, surprised by the question. For weeks, she had felt invisible, as though no one cared enough to notice her pain. But Caitlin's tone was genuine, inviting her to open up without pressure. Slowly, Mia began to share bits and pieces of her journey, the heartbreak, the loneliness, the fear of starting over. Caitlin listened intently, nodding occasionally, and offering words of encouragement. Over time, Mia started visiting the cafe more frequently, finding solace in the friendly faces and supportive conversations. She even joined a local art class recommended by another regular, rediscovering her passion for painting. By spring, Mia's confidence had blossomed, and she credited much of her healing to the connections she made at the cafe, and to Caitlin's unwavering kindness. Stories like Mia's weren't uncommon. Every week brought new visitors, each carrying their own burdens and hopes. Some came seeking advice, others companionship, and a few simply a listening ear. Caitlin welcomed them all with the same warmth and patience, never judging or rushing them. Her ability to see the humanity in everyone inspired those around her to do the same. One elderly man, Mr. Thompson, who had initially been gruff and standoffish, softened over time after witnessing Caitlin's interactions with others. He began striking up conversations with younger customers, sharing stories of his youth and offering sage advice. "You've taught me that it's never too late to start over," he told Caitlin one day, his eyes misty with gratitude. Meanwhile, Daniel continued to thrive in his newfound stability. His part-time job at the hardware store turned into a full-time position, and he earned praise from his manager for his dedication and positive attitude. Volunteering at the soup kitchen remained a cornerstone of his routine, giving him a profound sense of purpose. Each Saturday, he greeted visitors with a warm smile and a willingness to help, embodying the same spirit of compassion that Caitlin had shown him. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of Daniel's journey was his rekindled relationship with his sister Sarah. Their bond deepened with every phone call and visit, filling the void left by years of estrangement. Together they explored old photo albums, cooked meals reminiscent of their childhood, and dreamed of future adventures. On one occasion, Sarah surprised Daniel by showing up at the cafe unannounced, eager to meet Caitlin in person. "You saved my brother," Sarah said, tears welling up in her eyes as she hugged Caitlin tightly. "I don't know how to thank you." Caitlin smiled, brushing off the praise as she always did. "It wasn't me," she replied softly. "Daniel did the hard work. I just gave him a little push." Sarah shook her head, unconvinced. "No, it was more than that. You reminded him and us that we're worth saving." The encounter left Caitlin humbled once again, reinforcing her belief that kindness wasn't about grand gestures or heroic acts. It was about showing up, listening deeply, and believing in the possibility of change, even when it felt impossible. The ripple effects of Caitlin's actions extended far beyond individual lives, sparking broader initiatives within the community. Inspired by her example, local businesses collaborated to launch a kindness campaign, encouraging residents to perform random acts of goodwill and share their experiences online using the hashtag #SpreadTheWarmth. Schools incorporated lessons on empathy and active listening into their curriculum, teaching children the value of seeing others' perspectives. Neighbors organized block parties and potlucks, breaking down barriers and fostering stronger connections. Even city officials took notice, implementing programs aimed at addressing homelessness, mental health, and unemployment. Caitlin played an integral role in these efforts, though she preferred to stay behind the scenes. She participated in panel discussions, shared insights at community events, and mentored young entrepreneurs eager to create socially conscious businesses. Her message remained consistent. We all have the power to make a difference. It doesn't take much, just a little effort, a lot of heart, and a willingness to see the good in others. Despite her growing influence, Caitlin never lost sight of what mattered most: the everyday moments of connection that defined her life at the cafe. Whether it was remembering a regular's favorite order, cheering on a student studying for finals, or simply offering a kind word to someone having a tough day, she approached each interaction with sincerity and care. These small gestures may have seemed insignificant to outsiders, but to those on the receiving end, they meant the world. By summer, the cafe had become a symbol of hope and resilience, drawing visitors from neighboring cities and even other states. Tourists snapped photos of the vintage sign hanging above the door, bloggers raved about the cozy atmosphere, and journalists continued to write glowing articles about the little cafe that changed hearts. Yet amidst all the attention, Caitlin ensured that the essence of the space remained intact. It was still a haven for authentic human connection, a place where people could be themselves without fear of judgment. One particularly memorable visitor arrived on a humid August afternoon. A middle-aged man named Greg walked in, his face etched with exhaustion. He carried a backpack slung over one shoulder and wore clothes that looked slept in. Though he tried to blend in, his demeanor betrayed his struggles. Caitlin recognized the signs immediately: homelessness, hunger, despair. But instead of pity, she offered understanding. "Hi there," she greeted warmly as he approached the counter. "What can I get you today?" Greg hesitated, clearly embarrassed. "Just water, please," he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. I don't have much money." Caitlin nodded sympathetically. "Water's free here," she said with a reassuring smile. "And if you're hungry, we've got some leftover muffins from this morning. They're yours if you want them." Tears welled up in Greg's eyes as he accepted the food and drink. "Thank you," he whispered hoarsely. "Most places wouldn't look twice at someone like me." "Well, this isn't most places," Caitlin replied firmly. "Take your time, stay as long as you need." Over the next hour, Greg opened up about his battle with addiction, his failed attempts to rebuild his life, and the shame that kept him isolated. Caitlin listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and practical advice. Before leaving, Greg promised to seek help, vowing to turn his life around. Weeks later, he returned to the cafe clean-shaven and dressed neatly, proudly announcing that he had enrolled in a rehabilitation program. "You believed in me when no one else did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. That made all the difference. Moments like these reinforced Caitlin's conviction that everyone deserved a second chance, and that sometimes all it took was one person willing to extend a hand. As the year drew to a close, she reflected on how far she, Daniel, and countless others had come. Lives had been transformed, communities had been strengthened, and hearts had been healed, all because of a simple decision to choose kindness over indifference. Yet Caitlin knew the journey was far from over. There would always be more people to help, more stories to hear, and more lessons to learn. And so she continued doing what she did best: brewing coffee, building bridges, and reminding everyone who crossed her path that they mattered. Because in a world often divided by fear and misunderstanding, Caitlin Clark stood as a testament to the enduring power of compassion, a beacon of light guiding others toward hope, healing, and humanity. Little did she know, however, that the greatest chapter of her story was yet to unfold, one that would challenge her in ways she couldn't imagine, but ultimately reaffirm her faith in the goodness of people. As autumn returned to the city, painting the streets with hues of amber and gold, Caitlin found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that chilly morning when Daniel walked into the cafe. 2 years had passed, yet the memory of their encounter remained vivid in her mind, a reminder of how a single moment could alter the course of countless lives. The cafe, once a quiet retreat tucked away on a cobblestone street, had become a cornerstone of the community, a place where people came not just for coffee but for connection, hope, and healing. Caitlin's life, too, had transformed in ways she never anticipated. She was no longer just a barista. She was a symbol of kindness, a figure who inspired others to believe in the power of empathy. Yet despite the recognition and admiration, Caitlin stayed true to her roots. Her days began as they always had, brewing the first pot of coffee, arranging pastries on the counter, and greeting customers with her signature smile. To her, the cafe wasn't about fame or accolades. It was about creating moments that mattered, one cup at a time. But even Caitlin couldn't deny that the world around her had shifted. The ripple effects of her actions continued to spread, touching lives far beyond what she ever imagined. Schools across the country incorporated her story into their curriculums, teaching students the importance of listening, compassion, and resilience. Local governments launched initiatives aimed at fostering community engagement, citing Caitlin's example as proof that small acts of kindness could lead to meaningful change. Even global organizations reached out, inviting her to speak at conferences and events focused on social impact and human connection. Though Caitlin initially hesitated to step into the spotlight, she eventually embraced it, not for herself, but for the message she carried. "This isn't about me," she would often say during interviews or panel discussions. "It's about reminding ourselves that we all have the power to make a difference. Kindness isn't something extraordinary. It's ordinary people choosing to care." Her humility only deepened people's admiration for her. Strangers sent letters thanking her for inspiring them to be kinder, braver versions of themselves. Parents shared stories of how their children had started performing random acts of goodwill after hearing Caitlin's story. One mother wrote tearfully about her son, who began leaving encouraging notes in classmates' lockers saying, "He says he wants to be like you when he grows up." Yet amidst all the praise and attention, Caitlin faced challenges that tested her resolve. Running a cafe while juggling speaking engagements and community projects proved exhausting. Some days she felt overwhelmed by the weight of expectations placed upon her. There were moments when doubt crept in, moments when she questioned whether she was truly making a difference or simply riding a wave of fleeting popularity. It was during one such low point that Daniel walked back into the cafe, his presence offering exactly what Caitlin needed: perspective. By now, Daniel had fully rebuilt his life. He had secured a stable job, repaired relationships with loved ones, and continued volunteering at the soup kitchen. But more importantly, he had discovered a newfound sense of purpose, one rooted in giving back to the community that had supported him. "Hey, stranger," he greeted, sliding onto a stool at the counter. His smile was warm, familiar, and instantly comforting. "Mind if I steal a few minutes of your time?" Caitlin laughed softly, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "For you? Always." They sat together in a quiet corner of the cafe, sipping coffee and catching up. For the first time in weeks, Caitlin allowed herself to open up about her struggles, the exhaustion, the pressure, the fear of falling short. Daniel listened intently, nodding occasionally, but mostly letting her vent. When she finished, he leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "You know what I see when I look at you?" he asked. "I see someone who's changed my life, and probably thousands of others, in ways you'll never fully understand. You're not perfect, Caitlin. None of us are. But that's not the point. The point is that you keep showing up, day after day, doing what you can to make things better. That's enough." His words struck a chord within her, lifting a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. It reminded her why she started this journey in the first place, not for accolades or validation, but because she believed in the goodness of people and the transformative power of connection. In the months that followed, Caitlin rededicated herself to her mission. She scaled back on public appearances, focusing instead on nurturing the community she had helped build. She organized monthly gatherings at the Café, bringing together neighbors, volunteers, and local leaders to brainstorm solutions for pressing issues like homelessness, education, and mental health. These meetings fostered collaboration and innovation, leading to tangible outcomes: a new shelter opening downtown, a scholarship fund for underprivileged students, and free counseling services available at community centers. Meanwhile, Daniel took on a leadership role at the soup kitchen, mentoring others who were struggling to get back on their feet. Inspired by Caitlin's approach, he emphasized active listening and empathy, encouraging volunteers to see each visitor not as a statistic, but as a person with dreams, fears, and untapped potential. Together, they created a network of support that extended far beyond the walls of the Café. As winter approached, Caitlin decided to host a special event to celebrate the second anniversary of her encounter with Daniel. Dubbed a Night of Gratitude, the evening brought together everyone whose lives had been touched by the Café: regular patrons, volunteers, local business owners, and even some of the strangers who had traveled from afar to meet Caitlin. The room buzzed with laughter, music, and heartfelt conversations as people shared stories of transformation and hope. Daniel stood up near the end of the night, guitar in hand, ready to perform the song he had written 2 years earlier. As he strummed the opening chords, the crowd fell silent, captivated by the raw emotion in his voice. When he finished, applause erupted, filling the space with warmth and gratitude. Caitlin hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I owe you everything," Daniel whispered, pulling back to look at her. "You saved me, Caitlin, and through me, you've saved so many others." She shook her head, her voice barely audible over the cheers. "No, Daniel, we saved each other." The night ended with a surprise announcement. A documentary crew had spent the past year filming Caitlin's story, capturing her daily interactions, community efforts, and the profound impact she had on those around her. Titled, "One Cup at a Time." The film premiered nationally the following spring, further amplifying her message and inspiring millions worldwide. Despite the continued attention, Caitlin remained steadfast in her commitment to simplicity. She woke up every morning, brewed coffee, and welcomed whoever walked through the door with open arms. To her, the Café was more than just a business. It was a testament to the enduring power of human connection. It was proof that even in a world often divided by fear and misunderstanding, kindness could bridge gaps, heal wounds, and remind us of our shared humanity. And so, Caitlin Clark continued doing what she did best: pouring cups of coffee, building bridges, and lighting the way for others. Her journey wasn't without its challenges, but it was rich with meaning, purpose, and love. In a world hungry for hope, she stood as a beacon, a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures can spark the greatest changes. Little did she know, however, that the story of the Café, and her role in it, would continue to unfold, touching lives in ways she could never predict. Because kindness, like coffee, has a way of spreading farther than anyone expects, warming hearts and changing worlds, one sip at a time.